the reason why we call our system fractal is because we copied what works out there in the real world, because it has inherent in it these checks and boundaries, which there isn't a limit to inside of an organisation. Within the four walls, you can have a gopher who goes and gets you coffee and stuff like that. That seems to be okay. But you wouldn't do that in your real world.
No.
You don't do it in your home world, do you?
You don't employ a person just to get your coffee. A butler.
No, but that's not quite true. Sometimes you go to Starbucks, of course, or something like that.
But that's the difference. They're not going to get you coffee. Starbucks just say, well, if you come here, I'll give you coffee.
That's true.
We'll have a little
That's their model.
And you transact.
Well, Deliveroo will bring me a curry, but that's their model and it's profitable for them.
Yeah.
And if it's profitable for me and it's worth paying the extra to have it delivered,
So do you pay
then I'll do it.
Do you
but
pay
it's supply and
Deliveroo?
demand. It's the law of the jungle, isn't it? It's natural selection, rather than in a company where there are no pressures on it. On every part has to be cost effective.
No, look,
in a company, it can just be created,
but
even though it's completely stupid. But in real life, it'll never be created.
But in the company,
stupid.
there is checks and balances and limits to what you can and can't do, and often they're budgetary and they're HR limits that are put in the contract.
But I can hide a lot in my budget.
And they're very distorting.
Yes.
So what we're saying is the supply chain out there in the real world has checks and balances which are relatively cheap and seem to be working, and everybody knows about them. And when you bring that inside of an organisation, you realise how much money you've been wasting.
Yeah.
And it's not really about fixed rules of what you can and can't do. There's no fixed rule of a supply chain. You could have one company that supplies a whole load of stuff, or you can say, we'll divide it into 10.
Some trainers have their materials printed, and
Fantastic.
some of them photocopy it themselves, like I do.
But
There's no rule.
But you probably wouldn't divide it into 1,000.
No. And you look at it in your own context and decide whether it's worth it, because it hurts you if you get it wrong. Whereas in a company, it doesn't really hurt any one person. It just goes into the big mush.
Yeah, and the rules of the organisation in a conventional business say the bigger your function, the more important you are. How many people do you have under you?
Yeah, not as many as you've got.
And that's right. And this is the problem, that there's all these hidden rules of conventional organisations which are affecting this micro division of labour, which has gone past the point where it's efficient.
Yeah.
And as Andrew says, it's not like a cliff you fall off. What happens is you slowly tend to have the most people that you can afford. You divide it as much as you can afford.
And you get to a point where you're just not really making any money, and that's where you have to stop.
And you subsist.
And then you can't come back.
That's right.
And you can't, as you say, you can't come back because it's very difficult.
Because then you have to integrate. It's easy to differentiate,
but
it's just much harder to integrate.
Yeah, but your escape route is to set up a little fractal trial.
Yeah.
And if that works, you can set up a second one, and a third one, and a fourth one, and eventually you've got enough there. And by the time about half of it's gone fractal, because they're twice as efficient, you're now able to make everything. And then you can just kill off the carcass that is left of all the admin crap that you now don't need, because you've set up these little fractals.
But each one of these is self-leading. So remember, these are self-organising.
No management required.
No, and they're self-organising as well.